So what would what would the world look like in your view without the banking systems we have now? I mean, everybody is so used to this. Is what we've always had is money backed by gold, and a dollar, $2, $3. No one's ever thought of things in terms of value in any other way. How would the country or the world look without banks and only Bitcoin? What would be the biggest differences?
Well, so money has gone through five major revolutions since the beginning. If you start with early debt records from the Sumerians to shells and feathers and beads to precious metal nuggets, and then pressed into coins, and then paper money and certificates of deposit, and then eventually kind of plastic credit card stuff. Surprisingly, a lot of people in 2020 think that money is backed by gold. I just heard you say that. Our money is not backed by gold, hasn't been backed by gold since 1971. In fact, really since the early 1900s. There is no gold backing any of the national currencies anymore.
Isn't it backed by oil now?
Well, it indirectly, the US dollar is backed by oil only because there's this kind of deal with the Saudis, we bomb your enemies and protect your dictatorship, and in return, you only sell oil to other countries if they pay with dollars. But that's just the dollar. All the other countries, and in general, money is backed by economic use. If there's an economy that uses this currency, then that creates the expectation that if you have a unit of the currency, then tomorrow you can use it to buy something useful like eggs. That basis is the basis of money. It's utility. I expect this will still be useful tomorrow because it was useful today and useful yesterday. That illusion doesn't always work. Countries run into problems when that illusion is broken because the money doesn't actually buy as many eggs as you wanted. Huge inflation, crisis, collapse of government, etc. But for the most part, that's what money is backed by. Basically a social agreement and habit. So can it change again? Well, first of all, I don't think we're going to see a world where magically everything's going to get replaced by Bitcoin. Some Bitcoiners do. I don't see that. I think what we're going to see is a world where we had 194 currencies, each identified by a flag or a queen, to a world where there are thousands of currencies, 90% of them existing only in digital form, freely exchangeable and usable on the internet, a kind of mess, a kind of messy democratization of finance where everybody can kind of choose to use whatever's convenient at that moment. And with software, we're going to hide a lot of the nasty details so that maybe your software changes from one money to another without you really noticing, so that it's not as confusing. I think that's the world we're going into. And the reason I think that is because I've seen that happen with the internet and with previous technologies. Like there used to be 4 TV stations, right? Now there's tens of thousands of TV stations, but we don't really call them TV stations because it's really just independent programming whenever you want it. There used to be, major newspapers. Now they're still there, but they're not as important anymore. There used to be only one airline per country, had its flag on the tail, just like the currency is today. Now, if you told someone the only airline that can fly out of France is Air France, they'd be like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? So the idea that the only money you can use in France is the French money is also ridiculous. We just haven't quite seen that yet. The world is going to get more complicated, more nuanced, but that also means more democratic, more open, more accessible to a lot more people, because governments have abused their ability to control money consistently. As they do with many powers. So in the end, that happens at the expense of people who end up having to jump through all of these hoops simply to gain access to the main engine of economic activity and to essentially feed their family, protect their future. If you create opportunities for that to happen without the interference, through private means, through online systems that are open to everyone anywhere, that creates a very interesting future, an initially very messy and confusing future, but ultimately, in my opinion, one that has much more choice.
Another confusing thing to me is that, there's also the original Bitcoin, which the guy Satoshi Nakamoto created with that white paper. But then since then, there's been like dozens of other alternate coins that people have invented.
Yes.
So do you kind of relate that to being like someone having like a YouTube or a Hulu or Amazon Prime, they're creating their own little like spin-offs of television?
Yes, exactly. I mean,
But
Netflix did it.
they're using the exact same program that Satoshi Nakamoto came up with, right? Just like changing it a little bit.
Only some of them, especially the early ones, really modified the recipe very, very, only a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people tried to improve and modify. When you design a piece of software that has financial implications like this, every decision you make is a series of trade-offs. And some people disagree with the trade-offs. It's like, okay, Satoshi Nakamoto chose to make it very secure at the expense of making it very not so fast. What about if we make it more fast but less secure? And some people are like, yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so now there's another one. It's more fast but less secure. If that's what you need, great. And every shade in between on every axis of specialization you can imagine. So think of it as, first there was the Ford Model T. It was black. One color, one chassis, one function. You want a truck? It's still a Ford Model T. You want something to run around town? It's still a Ford Model T. You want it bigger? Sorry. You want it red? No. Now, the difference between a Ferrari and an agricultural tractor that is designed to haul logs through a forest is so vast that you might not even recognize them both as being effectively the same kind of automotive vehicle. And they've made different choices into how they treat the various trade-offs. And so you might say, well, the Ferrari's great. Not if I want to haul logs through a forest. It would be useless. It wouldn't get very far. And my agricultural tractor wouldn't go really, really fast around the Formula One track. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. And there is no one fits all purposes, because the purposes are so varied and because you can't predict what the purposes are going to be. So this has led to, as we see in many early technologies, is first you have a prototype that establishes, okay, this is a viable concept, the Ford Model T. And then people tweak it in 1,000 varieties and you get this explosion of variety, differentiation. Everybody tries to make a slightly different thing. And initially, they're all mostly copies of that, but eventually they become quite differentiated. So that's what's happening with this.